Labą dieną visiems. Iš ties, pirmiausia, norėčiau pasveikinti Europos Komisiją su intensyviu darbu skaitmeninių finansų srityje. Iš ties daromi dideli darbai, kad panaikinti fragmentaciją, kad būtų kapitalo rinka bendra ir turėtume bendresnius finansus visoje Europos Sąjungoje. Iš ties daug Europos Komisijos iniciatyvų dabar yra ant stalo ir jos pasiekė savo finalinę stadiją būtent dabar. Tai, man atrodo, artimiausių metų pamatysime ir daugiau pasiekimų. Tai aš manau, kad komisarė galės plačiau apie tai papasakot. Iš savo pusės mes taip pat aptarėme ir Lietuvos situaciją, ir Lietuvos fintechų situaciją pirmiausia. Esame jau kuris laikas laikomi kaip fintechų tiek europinių, tiek turbūt jau ir pasaulinių centrų fintechų kompanijų ir tikrai turime tiek kokybinę, tiek ir kokybinę plėtrą šio pobūdžio įmonių ir kaip tik pastaruoju metu buvo rengiamos drauge su rinka ir su reguliatorium ir su Finansų ministerija ir su priežiūros institucijom naujos gairės ateinantiem 5 metam, kuriuose būtų užduoti pagrindinės kryptis, kaip turėtų vystytis fintech sektorius Lietuvoje. Dalyvavo per 70 įvairių ekspertų. Šių gairių pagrindų bus parengtos strateginės plėtros gairės 22-27 metam, kurias planuojame atnešti ir į Lietuvos Respublikos vyriausybę. Ir turbūt pagrindiniai tikslai tų fintech pokyčių yra, kad visgi įsitvirtinti kaip europinis fintechų aukštos pridėtinės vertės centras ir kad būtų užtikrinta tiek ir kokybinė, tiek ir kiekybinė fintechų plėtra Lietuvoje. Ir orientuojamės tikrai į aukštą pridėtinę vertę, į visos ekosistemos brandą, į inovatyvius sprendimus, tačiau taip pat nepamirštant ir riziko valdymo, ir kompetencijų stiprinimo šioje srityje. Norime visgi būti ne tik aukštos pridėtinės vertės centras, bet taip pat ir būti tuo patikimu ir saugiu regionu tokio pobūdžio investicijoms. Ir kalbant apie turbūt paskutinius pokyčius, kuriuos taip pat Lietuvoje gyveninom šitoje srityje, tai yra ir kripto sektoriaus reguliavimo pasikeitimai. Žinom, kad Europos Komisija rengia platesnį europinio lygmens reguliavimą šiai sričiai, bet matydami pokyčius ir tendencijas darėm savo pirmus žingsnius, visgi norime būti vienu žingsniu priekį ir visą laiką, kaip ateina europinis reguliavimas, manom, kad galim Lietuvoje sudaryti tokias sąlygas, kad tiesiog pasirinktume šiek tiek anksčiau, šiek tiek geriau ir mūsų įmonės būtų pirmos prie starto linijos tuomet, kada europinis reguliavimas bus nustatytas bendras. Tai buvo tam tikri priimti Seime sprendimai dėl kripto sektoriaus reguliavimo, dėl jo skaidrinimo ir manom, kad tie sprendimai prisidės prie to, kad mūsų jurisdikcija būtų laikoma kaip patikima ir saugia ir tuo pačiu tai yra lyg ir namų darbai ruošintis tą jau europiniam reguliavimui ir manom, kad tai padės mūsų įmonėms tiesiog prisitaikyti šiek tiek anksčiau ir būti pasirengusiems prie pokyčių, kurie ateina skaitmeninių finansų srityje visoje Europoje. Tai turbūt tokios naujienos iš mūsų srities ir perduodu tuomet žodį komisarei.
So, do I do this and then you speak? What way do you want me to? Okay, so thank you very much, Minister, first of all, for meeting me here in Lithuania. We meet a lot in Brussels, but it's always nicer to come to the country. And in fact, it's part of our role as commissioners to be present. I wanted to come to Lithuania for many reasons, not just to escape the hot weather in Brussels, but I do appreciate the calm and the good weather here. But the Minister speaks of the future of finance, and I think all you've mentioned there, particularly trust, is key to the future of finance. So when we're in this home of fintech, home of innovation, first I want to commend the work you're doing here and the work that the Minister is doing to support the evolution of this sector. You know, the future is definitely green and digital. This is where Europe is heading, and we need to advance on that journey. The COVID crisis taught us many things. It taught us of the importance of unity of purpose and Europe united in action. It also taught us that we can change dramatically and that technology allowed us to change our ways of working, our ways of interacting dramatically, and our ways of dealing with the financial system. So a younger generation are learning about a financial system that is perhaps different, and you are younger than me. My learning of the financial system involved queuing at a bank. Today it's very, very different. Technology can allow us know what we're doing, what we're spending on at a very micro level. It can also harness other opportunities for all sectors. So the question is, how do we harness innovation and how do we manage risk? And this is the balance that we have to get right. So it was really good to hear from the sectors today, not just questions for me, but also comments that I can take back when I look at the work that I am doing in relation to financial services. If I move to other areas of my work, I mentioned green and digital. And a very big part of the work we're talking about at the moment is energy in Europe, but also the green transition away from fossil fuels. So, two things are important. First of all, we need to move rapidly away from dependence, over-reliance, Europe in general, not Lithuania, but Europe in general, on Russian fossil fuels. But this should make us really advance our work on alternative energy sources, also saving energy. This is a big announcement today in Brussels, energy efficiency, and in particular investments in renewables. Green finance, sustainable finance is part of that. So how do we finance this transition? There is an appetite amongst investors to invest in what is sustainable. People do not want to invest in something that is stranded assets or will not yield the result. So we look to try and, with our work on sustainable finance through our taxonomy, through corporate reporting around sustainability, to encourage all of us to move in that direction. And in this very difficult geopolitical situation that we are living through, there is an opportunity to advance our work around investments in renewables, and I think Europe will do that. It's also a challenge, but I think Europe has been challenged before, and we have to find ways forward. In relation to other areas of my work and our work together with the Minister and other ministers, other colleagues look after the macro picture, I look after the financial system. What was very important for us, if you look at what happened post-COVID, governments and the ECB acted in a way to ensure that citizens and businesses did not suffer during the lockdowns during COVID. We emerged from the COVID crisis with our financial system strong and resilient. And that was because we regulated effectively after the crash. It was also because finance ministers around the European Union took important decisions. That allows us to go into the current context where we're dealing with the horrible impacts on the reality of war on European soil, an illegal war, an invasion where we see children victims, human beings, human lives destroyed, and the destruction of buildings. It is horrific. And therefore we need to do everything we are in standing in solidarity with Ukraine. And as you know, we have rolled out 6 sanctions packages. We will now have proposals around clarifications and updates, and everything remains on the table. And I compliment our member states, and I think Lithuania has been leading in this regard in terms of implementation. And we have a duty in the Commission to answer questions, to provide all of the guidance that we can. But we have moved at speed, and we have really implemented very deep sanctions, and I really commend both the financial system and our governments for their capacity to act. A very interesting question arose earlier to me, that do we need more European harmonization around sanctions? And of course, out of every crisis we can learn. And one of the questions that we should remain open to is if there is a need to look at whether there could be more a European approach to sanctions, and we will gather the views and the assessments of our member states. We will listen to the European Parliament, and we remain as a Commission open to hearing ideas and feedback in relation to that. Last comment, it is good to be in member states. It is perhaps one of the most important and I think enjoyable parts of my role, because I always go back to Brussels with new ideas, with the ground speaking to me, which is really important. And I think we make better policy when we listen. So thank you, Minister, for your time. My full appreciation to the Prime Minister, to the President, to the Bank of Lithuania. I've had an excellent engagement, and the day is not over. Thank you.
Ačiū labai, ačiū ministrei, ačiū komisijos nariai.
Well, let me just speak generally about sanctions and impact. Sanctions are designed to impact on Russia, and they will impact more deeply over time. And I think that's really important for us to understand that every package of sanctions we have rolled out will have a deeper impact on Russia and the war machine that is causing such horror. Of course, there are impacts on the European Union economy, and we've been very open and honest with citizens to say that if we provide support, which citizens want us to do, for Ukraine in this horrible time, then we have to know that there are consequences, but they are manageable. Yes, there are different expectations of how the economy will move this year, including the Lithuanian economy, but I think this is really important. We are revising downwards growth projections, but Europe will grow. That's very key. It will grow this year and next year. And of course, there are still many uncertainties about the way and the times we live in, about the evolution of this horrible illegal invasion. But we are resolute in ensuring that we manage and watch for consequences. But thus far, we can say that we are not seeing fragility in our economies, in our financial system. There is resilience there, and I'm encouraged by that. I'm also encouraged by the sense of solidarity that has united the European Union in this area. It's extremely difficult to watch what's happening on our screens and not to be moved by it. But it's not enough just to be moved by it, we have to act. And the way we act is through our sanctions mechanism. So if there is a spillover impact on the European economy, of course we have to make sure we calibrate sanctions so that the impact on us is much less. But to your very point, I think we can manage this by being very watchful and being very mindful, and that's the role of the Commission. Just on this question, you know that we issued guidelines very recently which has clarified the situation between rail and road, but equally clarified that Member States have a duty to check what is moving through, and that sanctioned goods like military and dual purpose are completely restricted. What I hope I don't get a sense of is that in our work on guidelines, which evolves over time, because I think I've been very clear that 6 sanctioned packages have been very deep and very rolled out at great speed. We always have to give guidance, and we sometimes have to upgrade guidance. Lithuania has complied fully because this is what Lithuania is leading on, and our guidance is now giving clarity. So to suggest that there are changes or that we deviate is not accurate. We clarify. And it goes back to maybe the point of the first question, that there are always implications of sanctions regimes, sometimes small, sometimes large. It is our duty as a Commission to provide guidance, sometimes on several moments. We equally have issues around beneficial ownership. So some wealthy Russians may be trying to circumvent by changing who are handing on assets to others. We have to watch for all of these. But when it comes to the particular point you asked, I think it's clear now. Well, I think what we do when we roll out sanctions initially, we discuss with the representatives of the Member States, and in fact that's happening today on this more recent maintenance package that you will have details of. It's the same with each of the sanctions that have been rolled out. We need to clarify and provide guidance. So I don't see this as an issue. To the great credit of Lithuania, whether it's this particular point you raise or others, and I get a deep sense of that here because not just of location but clearly history. Lithuania has certainly been 100% complying with sanctions and also providing guidance as it is requested, and that's what we provide. Well, this is hot news today, but you know we've been speaking about how do we deal with a potential scenario where gas becomes unavailable. We know that Russia is weaponizing gas. It sadly is weaponizing grain to the detriment of globally insecure countries. It is really an immoral situation. When you come to gas, what we're talking about is being prepared. So we would be guilty if we did not prepare for what might happen, the worst possible case scenario. And that's why energy saving is crucial. It is possible to save energy. It's just it requires business and individuals to calibrate energy use. It will be perhaps really important that we save energy when and if we find ourselves in a difficult situation around gas. You know already that REPowerEU requires that member states build up their gas storage. It requires our commitment to energy efficiency. But energy saving is absolutely key. On the question of impact, what we're doing with this proposal is making sure that all member states contribute so that there is an impact for all of Europe rather than just one or two. And I dare say that between now and the winter period, where we will obviously have concerns about what happens then, there will be a concerted effort amongst member states to tackle the energy saving piece. I think what's been interesting, because I spoke earlier about green finance, we're finding some member states reopening coal-powered plants out of necessity because of a fear around energy insecurity. Clearly, we hope that these are short-term measures because the future is green and sustainable and away from fossil fuels. So we are definitely in a very challenging situation. But like we reacted with COVID, the strength comes from unity. And that's why we do have this 15% across all of our member states. And we will work with member states to facilitate this rollout of this particular proposal. But we're also working to find alternative energy suppliers, suppliers that will not be found wanting when it comes to their obligations to supply us. And we see that happening already. We know that there are investments being rolled out in LNG terminals. I think Lithuania was better prepared, perhaps, than other member states in this regard, and we could learn from what Lithuania has done. So everywhere and every way we can use less energy, use it more efficiently, have more secure supply sources, will make Europe stronger and more secure. There could be consequences, but I think we have to plan for the worst case scenario so that we avoid it. And you know, all of our efforts as a European Union of 27 is in that regard. And that's why while the college today took a decision, I was part of that. I'm glad that I'm here in Lithuania to try and explain the purpose and how it will happen, because we do want to be prepared for the winter period where we want to make sure that there are sufficient supplies. And of course, member states are also obliged to look internally at if there are energy and security issues, where do we get the energy to, where are the most important needs, where energy needs to be supplied to. But again, I want to repeat an earlier observation I made, that you know, in times of crisis, you either react strongly or you lie down under it. And Europe is reacting strongly. We can advance our work around the European Green Deal, around investments in renewables. We have the capacity. We need to find out where the bottlenecks are, including in planning, and remove those and work towards advancing our work because renewables is the future, as is digital, as I'm learning here in this wonderful centre. And I think that this is a moment where we have to be strong together, and we proved we could be in other crises, not least around COVID. So on crypto, we already have just recently put forward, and it's gone through the process, markets in crypto assets. I was there for the last trialogue of the discussions between the Council and the Parliament, and there was a real sense of urgency that this was important. Europe is leading the way, so we're the first major community to put something on the table, and I'm glad that we're doing that. In terms of what's happened around crypto, I was aware of this when I took over my mandate in the Commission to watch what was happening. So we didn't have huge concerns around financial stability with crypto. That's not to say that over time, if it continues to grow, that we would have to look at this issue, which is why regulation is important. I have concerns around the social impacts of those who have lost through crypto. Many young people who invested because they believed the future was always rosy and in one direction, and sadly many have learned to their cost that is not the case. But I do think that crypto is part of the financial system and needs to be regulated as such. I think your question has two answers when it comes to exchange rate. There's a lot of commentary about parity, so it's good for some and not others. So I think you answered the question about the trade effects. When we look at the macro picture and look at what's happening globally, COVID has disrupted supply chains, and maybe we haven't acknowledged that still persists. So there are some difficulties. If I talk to some industrialists across Europe, they tell me, which is really interesting, their order books are full, but they cannot get sufficient workers and they cannot get the parts and components. So that's having an impact on production, on supplying orders, but I think over time that will work its way through. We watch all of these things, including exchange rates. We know that inflation is a reality, different rates across our member states. We also know that interest rates are increasing. I suppose I'm old enough to know when interest rates were shockingly high during the 1980s. I think that we are more looking to a future where, yes, this year inflation is high and interest rates will increase, but we do predict that inflation will moderate next year. And I think that's a very important message, so that people understand that some of the reasons for the current levels of inflation will be moderated over the next 12 months.
Iš principo gal norėčiau keletą sakinių gal nuo pačios pradžios, kadangi buvo klausimas, kaip sankcijos paveiks mūsų ekonomiką, tai aš pirmiausia tą klausimą norėčiau statyti, kad ne sankcijos veikia mūsų ekonomiką, o karas veikia mūsų ekonomiką ir veikia gerokai stipriau negu sankcijos pačios savaime, nes sankcijų įgyvendinimas, jų poveikis yra labai ribotas. Ir apribotų prekių kiekis taip pat yra pakankamai ribotas, kurios keliaudavo per Lietuvos Respubliką, tarkim, ir poveikis tiesioginis turbūt būtų tokiom įmonėm kaip Lietuvos geležinkeliai ar mūsų uostas, tačiau kalbant apie platesnį poveikį ekonomikai, tikrai ne sankcijos daro žalą mūsų ekonomikoms, tačiau būtent karas ir, sakyčiau, Rusijos veiksmai, kurie buvo dar iki karo, keliant energetinės prekių kainas ir ribojant pasiūlą Europai. Ir tą pasiūlą ribojant dabar dar labiau, turbūt bandant pavaizduoti taip kaip atsakai sankcijas, bet tai yra niekas kitas kaip tik tai poveikio priemonė, kuomet yra energetinės prekės naudojamos kaip ginklas ir mes turbūt iš savo patirties turbūt tą žinome daug geriau. Ir tas poveikis turbūt pasireiškia per daugelį dalykų, tai yra ir energetinių prekių kainos, kurios taip pat turi poveikį ir mūsų pramonės įmonėm, kadangi tai yra vienas iš pagrindinių žaliavų, kurios yra naudojamos, kurios sudaro didelę dalį sąnaudų. Taip pat daro poveikį ir maisto kainom, kas veikia mūsų ir labiausiai pažeidžiamas grupės. Ir tai turbūt turi tiesioginį poveikį ne tik tai per energetinių prekių kainas, bet taip pat ir per tiesioginius karo veiksmus, kadangi yra ribojamas grūdų išvežimas iš Ukrainos ir mes tą labai gerai matom. Tai aš tiesiog tą klausimą pirmiausia per poveikį ekonomikoms statyčiau ne per sankcijų poveikį, kas man atrodo labai klaidingas požiūris yra, bet per Rusijos invazijos poveikį. Nebūtų karo, nebūtų sankcijų, nebūtų apskritai šitos visos situacijos ir turbūt turėtume visai kitokį augimą Europoje. Jeigu mes iš pradžių prognozavo Lietuvoje augimą virš 4%, tai dabar augimas, kuris yra numatytas, jis yra tarptautinių institucijų ir finansų ministerijos prognozuojamas apie 1,6–2% šiais metais ir kitais metais apie 3%. Tai matom, kad nepaisant to, kad situacija tikrai yra sunki ir esam paveikti visi. Bet ekonominis augimas išlieka ir man atrodo šitoj vietoj solidarizuojantis su Ukrainos žmonėmis, matom, kad jiem yra gerokai sunkiau, todėl bet kokie veiksmai, kurie gali prisidėti prie to, kad bus paveiktas Rusijos elgesys, jie turėtų būti daromi ir man atrodo čia kalbėjimas apie sankcijų kainą, jisai tiesiog yra ne ta pusė pasuktas klausimas. Man atrodo, pirmiausia, turime nuspręsti, kokiu būdu galime paveikti Rusijos veiksmus, Rusijos galimybę sustiprinti savo kariuomenę ateityje ir prisidėti prie tolimesnių karinių veiksmų ar šitoje ar kitoje vietoje, bet Europos žemynė. Ir manau, kad šioje vietoje kaštai įgyvendinant sankcijų režimą yra gerokai mažesni, negu jie galėtų būti, jeigu mes nieko nedarytume. Tai man atrodo, pirmiausia, turbūt turėtume kalbėti apie karo poveikį mūsų ekonomikai, o ne sankcijų poveikį. Na, kaip minėjau, turbūt mūsų ekonomikai pagrindinį poveikį daro einamuoju laikotarpiu būtent energetikos rinka ir energijos aukštos kainos, kurios daro tiesioginį poveikį ir infliacijai. Ir matom, kad tie veiksniai, kurie įtakoja infliacijos augimą, 2/3 jų ateina iš išorinių veiksnių. Tai turbūt sakyčiau, kad tiesioginį poveikį daug didesnį daro Rusijos kariniai veiksmai ir kiti veiksmai susiję su energetikos rinka, negu kad turbūt palūkanų normų reguliavimas. Natūralu, kad tai taip pat turės poveikį centrinio banko veiksmai, bet turbūt pagrindinis poveikis, kuris yra jaučiamas ekonomikoje, tai yra pirmiausia dėl energetikos, dėl sutrūkinėjusių tiekimo grandinių ir turbūt tai daro didesnį poveikį augimui ir infliacijos raidai negu centrinio banko veiksmai. Natūralu, kad centrinio banko veiksmai taip pat turės poveikį, bet kažkaip esminių pokyčių ekonominiam rodikliam aš nesitikėčiau. Skolos aptarnavimo kaštai Lietuvos nuosekliai mažėjo pastaruosius turbūt daugelį metų ir jeigu anksčiau taip sudarydavo tikrai ženklę biudžeto dalį, tai pastaruoju metu jie tikrai turi tendenciją mažėti ir manom, kad ateinančiais metais, nepaisant priimtų sprendimų, skolos aptarnavimo kaštai tiek 23, tiek 22 metais turėtų būti panašus. Ir kalbant apie antifragmentacijos pasiūlymą, turbūt reikėtų sulaukti pirmiausia pasiūlymo, kuris galėtų būti pristatytas. Tačiau mano nuomonė labai svarbu, kad visos šalis narės būtų traktuojamos vienodai ir turėtų vienodas galimybės ir vienodas teisės. Todėl bet kokie specialūs režimai tikrai turėtų būti vertinami labai atsargiai, vertinant ir tolimesnį poveikį ir motyvacijai elgtis atsakingai.
If I may say very briefly, the ECB is independent, so tomorrow we will hear their considered view, but we know that rates will rise, and I think I would endorse what the Minister said. May I also say that I want to support, Minister, what you said about where we should focus our worries. And frankly, when you see the horror that is being inflicted on families, on individuals, on children, recently murdered by Russian bombs, then I think whatever impacts we feel at the European level pale into insignificance with the loss of life and the destruction of towns and cities. And the one reason I particularly wanted to come to Lithuania, and I travel on to Latvia, is because perhaps in the member state I know best where we are welcoming refugees from Ukraine, and this is our duty and responsibility. It's important for me to feel the history. The reality for citizens in Lithuania in terms of your proximity both to Russia and of course to Ukraine. And while you can have conversations about this, it is only when you are physically in the country that you feel this very deeply. So my appreciation to the Minister for now, but also for our engagement in Brussels, to the Prime Minister for her engagement today, and to the President and to the Central Bank. It's been a very instructive visit, and I want to thank the media also for their presence here, and to thank Rocket for the use of the hall. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Savo ruožtu sakau ačiū ministrei, ačiū komisijos nariui, labai ačiū šeimininkams, kurie mus priėmė.